Welcome to the Real Paranormal Stories podcast with your host, Christopher Buckner. Send your stories to realparanormalstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Royalty-free music provided by Kevin MacLeod and Tabletop Audio. And now, let's take a trip into the paranormal. This story comes from Reddit user Comfortable-Area 3723. And this is their story. Long ago, my brother and I sometimes shared a room while on vacation, where we would stay over together. We played games and often gamed. My brother is known for sleepwalking, which usually happened in phases, several times a year for a few weeks at a time. Once, he ended up standing under the shower before waking up. Another time, he was descending the stairs, still asleep, misstepped, and fell down. My parents found him downstairs, took him back up, treated his wounds, and he went back to sleep. About 15 minutes later, he woke up and started crying. This story is about an autumn day. I had a Jip and Janneke, a famous Dutch children's book, lamp hanging over my bed, emitting a soft blue light. I woke up to knocking on my door. I didn't respond. After repeated pounding, I saw the door handle moving up and down. I remember lying in bed, petrified. What? Why is this happening? Suddenly, the handle turned down. The door opened, and on the floor, I saw a figure. Not a shadow, but a sort of shape. An arm was in the air, fist clenched. It moved toward me in a worm-like motion, faster than someone crawling or sneaking. Suddenly, the fist was beside my bed. I was terrified. What is this now? Every time I tried to move my hands to my head, the fist came between them and my head. It seemed to sense when I did this. It was truly bizarre. I think I haven't slept so badly in ages. It felt like hours, but realistically, it was probably about 3 minutes. Then the fist lowered, and the figure remained lying there. I didn't dare do anything. Gradually, I fell back to sleep in silence. The next morning, I looked on the floor, and it was gone. I couldn't figure out if it was my brother or not. I still can't. I'm still not entirely sure. My brother and parents don't remember anything about it. What it was, I have no idea. Was it my brother? No idea. Maybe sleep paralysis? I genuinely don't know. And that is their story. This story comes from Reddit user DefiantMix6875. And this is their story. Throughout my whole childhood, my family and I would move from apartment to apartment. Let's call it apartment 2. Everything was going great at our new place. The apartment was old, but it had everything we needed. A pool, laundromat, and it was by our school. At this time, I was living with my mom, my sister, and my little nephews in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. My mom gifted me a camera, and all of us started just taking pictures for fun. I wanted to be a YouTuber at the time, LOL. We looked back at the pictures we were taking, and we noticed an extra person. They were small, wearing white, and it was creeping behind a corner. We all argued it was the youngest of our family, but he kept saying he was standing elsewhere. My nephew insisted it was not him. We all did not want to believe what had happened, so we shrugged it off. A different day, my mom and I were in our room. We were poor. We shared a room. We saw a fast shadow running in the hall from the living room to the second bedroom. It was short in height, and it is so hard to explain why, but we got a sense that it wanted us to follow it, almost like hide and seek. My mom and I followed what we thought was my little nephew playing around. We ran into the room and we looked absolutely everywhere, and we could not find my nephew. My mom and I looked at each other. We knew what we had just seen, but we never spoke about it after that day. I myself couldn't believe it, so I went looking around. In my room, behind the door, I had found marks of 2 children's heights written in pencil. The names were foreign and not any I had heard before. One of the markings on the wall was very similar to that of the shadow's height. My second to oldest nephew, let's call him Jim, would have recurring nightmares at weird times of the night. Jim would randomly wake up at 2 or 3 a.m., sobbing and pointing at the corner. Jim was speechless and would only pause from crying to once say, "There are shadow people looking at me." None of us but Jim were able to see anything there. This continued to happen a handful of times around the same time. 11 years later, my sister picked me up from the airport after I had gone to Mexico. On the way back home, I was telling her about folklore stories I had been told by a priest in Mexico. Without me saying anything, she said, "You know, I never told you, but I saw a ghost at our last apartment. It was short and see-through. It had been watching me shower." She went on to mention it had watched her shower 2 times, and every time she would look at it, it would get startled, run into the closet door, and vanish into thin air. She agreed with me that this entity had a harmless, playful, childlike feeling to it. After I moved out to college, she continued to tell me that more things were happening. My youngest nephew was in his room lying on the top bunk bed while playing his Switch. He felt the strong kick from the bottom bed and yelled angrily, "Jim, stop it!" It happened once more, then he got irritated and looked below his bed to find nobody there. He started screaming and crying until his mom came into the room to comfort him. My family moved out a few years later, but not primarily because of the ghost, or ghosts. To this day, I wonder if a child had passed in that apartment, and if what we saw was indeed the same ghost. All we know is that by the way it acted, this child ghost wanted to be included in our family. And that is their story. That's all for this episode of the Real Paranormal Stories podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review anywhere this podcast can be found.